My name is Carol Forsloff, and I'm a journalist. I edit a newspaper in Natchitoches, Louisiana, which is in the north central part of the state. I think a lot of what comes out of New Orleans has been sensation because it sells newspapers. There's been a concentration on sensation as opposed to serious reporting and reporting based upon quality evidence. People didn't look at all of the facts when they were writing them, partly because they didn't have the facts, partly because some of them were covered up, and partly because they didn't do their homework. The focus was on the negative. It showed lots of people angry, frightened, crime in the streets, people knocking on windows, looking like they were going to enter and steal and things like that. We noticed that in the north central part of the state, what the focus was. In the article, I indicated that people knew that the levees might give way, and indicated, that maybe there was some culpability of the citizenry. I didn't say that, but I had wondered why people would remain in a city that they knew had risks. And I got an email from Sandy Rosenthal, and she said, "You need to take a second look at this." And what I found out was, in fact, that the people didn't know that the levees would break. I realized that the mistake I'd made was a serious one. It was not a simple one. In my mind, because if the people didn't know the levees would break, that meant that insurance, for example, would be more forthcoming. There might be more compassion from people. There would be less blame for the people. It makes a lot of difference in how people will look at New Orleans and the people who live here. I told Sandy that I would write an article that would talk about my mistake and perhaps rectify that by writing a little more about what really happened. And so that was an adventure. I read everything I could find. I talked to a number of people. I had been a counselor, a mental health counselor, volunteer in Natchitoches at the time of Hurricane Katrina. So I remembered the pain of those people and the grief of those days. And I thought about them as I wrote the articles. That was the thrust of my writing, to bring an awareness of the technical issues as well as the emotional side, to tell of real people and what happened to them, and also to talk about the things, the technical things that had occurred and the politics of them. I wrote a story about a woman who died during the storm. I used her as the prime example of a personal loss. The reason I used her is because she was my age when she died. I mean, she was the age that I was at the time. She had the same ailments I have. She was diabetic, had hypertension, metabolic syndrome. And I said to myself, suppose I was in New Orleans when this happened, and I didn't know that it was going to flood that way. Nobody told me. With my health situation, what would have happened to me? And the answer was, I would have died, just like she did. Someone with diabetes needs to have certain food and certain type of support, and they can't have undue stress, which she had. So as I talked with her daughter, it became personal for me. The story became personal for me. It became more than just an error on an article. It began to take shape. I could see myself in that neighborhood with those friends, with those people, going back after a pet across the street to make sure that the pet was safe. I'm the kind of person who would have done that. Here was a woman who had started life in difficulty. She had been an immigrant to Israel and then to America. Her family had gone through trial in order to acquire freedom, only for her to die for lack of responsibility of others when she didn't have to. That could have been me. New Orleans, as a city, is trying to cope with the trauma. And it's a trauma that shouldn't have happened, you see, because had they done proper inspections on a regular basis, had they, noted that it was possible for the levees to breach, then people would have not lost their homes, lost their lives, lost their health. And when everything is sorted out, the most important thing is not the material loss of a house or a television set. The most important thing is the loss of human dignity and human rights and relationships and life. And that happened and shouldn't have. I hope people will read what I wrote, because we need to have that investigation I talked about. And we need to, as a nation, address the fact that all of us forgot the city. We missed opportunities to help. The city could have recovered more by now, and now it's urgent. And so that's my final message.